Okay, guys, welcome back to the show. I got rid of that long video, Niall, for my shows now. It's just too long, and it needs to be updated. And I was just like, oh, you know what, fuck that. And then I had one of the lingerie girls on the for the lingerie fighting championships. So someone put a
Yeah.
comment underneath the video. It was okay, apart from the first 1 minute.
Yeah.
So that
You gotta
that
gotta
that
pay your dues,
that
don't you?
comment,
You gotta pay your dues to get to what you want to
yeah,
get to. So, yeah.
that comment got to me. But look, you were actually, I was checking this up before we went live today. You were on episode 25 of the podcast with me on my podcast when I was recording on Skype at the kitchen table. And here we are now at episode 272. We're back together again. I know we've done a few football ones in between, but
Nearly
it's been a long
250
couple of
episodes
years.
on. 250
Yeah,
episodes on nearly, yeah. Wow.
yeah. So look, for people that don't know you, we're going to talk about your podcast later on, but like
Yeah,
you obviously wrestling is a significant part of your life and you have the only
absolutely.
wrestling store in Ireland and I believe there's none in the UK anymore now if I'm reading correctly. Is that true?
I think there's one. I
Oh,
think
there's
there's
one
one.
left.
Yeah, there's one left, I think. Yeah, it's not an easy business. You have to be dedicated to it. Sometimes this isn't the business you're in to make money. This is the business in because you love it. I just love pro wrestling. So I dedicated myself to running a shop dedicated to pro wrestling because that's what I love doing. And it was easy for me to move into that kind of work. So at times when it's not making the money you'd like it to make, you struggle through because you love pro wrestling. And that's it.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
of course January is always a terrible month in Ireland anyway. I don't know about anywhere else if anyone else is watching all over the world, but
absolutely.
once you once you get through January you're okay.
Mm.
You're the goat, brother. I think this whoever none of your own business is really really taking the piss tonight. I'm certainly not the goat of anything, but here we are anyway. But look, we're gonna talk about the Vince stuff anyway. That's what we said we'd kind of come on and talk about today. I tried to get a few people to come on with us that kind of had toes in the business, but that's kind of the problem. Sometimes some guys are afraid maybe to
Mm.
overstep the line just in case the phone calls, as we always say on this. And I can
Absolutely.
understand that too. If
Mm.
WWE call you, that's what it's all about, the biggest company in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be
Yeah.
so careful, don't you? Especially if you're still intertwined in the business in one way or another. Or if you've been heavily involved in the business and you're waiting on a Hall of Fame call up or something like that, or a Royal Rumble spot or something like that. You have to be
Yeah.
so careful out there.
Yeah, I've talked to guys before now and they just won't do a podcast because they'll be
Yeah.
anything they'll say be kind of blown up in the wrestling world or whatever and they just I've heard
Which
like
is what happens. It's what happens.
yeah,
That's how
yeah,
much. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but yeah, no, it's a difficult one, obviously, and I'm sure there's probably a number of people out there in the roster at the moment as well, and they're probably a bit concerned about what they've been saying over the last 6 to 7 months as well.
yeah, yeah,
So it's not just people who aren't directly involved. People who are directly involved who have been singing the praises of one absentee, and now the man is back, back with a bang. And I think there was obviously a little bit of naivety there if they thought that a billionaire was just going to head off and get into his rocking chair on his porch and smoke his pipe and forget about the world that existed. Um,
yeah.
yeah,
I was like when we rewind back to when Vince left, I was kind of always of the opinion that he was still kind of there, and I still am. But a lot of people were saying, "Oh, everything has changed now, and Triple H is in. He's doing this, that, and the other." But when I was looking at the television show, I didn't see that much difference in terms of a TV show. I know kind of the personnel was different. Like, what did you think about that?
I think there was more of a structure in terms of the show didn't revolve around one or two pieces of the business, if you like. So there was a structure there where you had a kind of a start, a middle, and an end to the show and stuff like that. And I thought stuff was put together a little bit better. And I thought in terms of promo work and in terms of ring work, I thought that roster members in there, I think they had a bit more creative control, if
Freedom.
you look, a little bit of freedom in there that they hadn't had in a long time. And I know a lot of the reports were coming out backstage, certainly that the atmosphere backstage wasn't as tense and as harsh it was a bit more conducive to better work. And I think that did come out. I think the quality of what they'd been putting out had definitely improved. I was at Clash at the Castle. I thought it was excellent. I think kind of from SummerSlam onwards, I think they kind of kicked it up a gear and turned it up a notch. And I often find from managing staff myself in a previous job and stuff like that, I often know that like it's way more easier to do the job and get the results if you motivate the staff. You know from your own position as well, Morris, than if you're dogging and
Yeah,
demotivating all the time. It just gets tiresome and boring, and it wears them down eventually. And then ultimately, what happens is they end up leaving, or they end up sitting in catering and they're not used and all that kind of stuff. And then, but there's so many levels to this story. And the roster is affected in so many different ways. If you go back to even Steph's statement, and there's no doubt that the announcement or the pending announcement in relation to the sale definitely is connected, I would imagine, with her resignation as well. So
yeah. Do
yeah.
you think? Do you think it could have been a situation where he laid that on the table for them and said, "Oh, Saudi are going to buy this," and he kind of maybe called their bluff to get his way back in?
No, I don't. I don't think he's calling
No.
their bluff at all. I don't think so, because I don't think the thing about it is, they do two big shows in Saudi Arabia every year, the crown jewel shows and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
it's worth big money to the company as well. I think they're paid somewhere in the region of, did I read somewhere, either 50 million or 100 million a show or something like that. So it's big
Yeah, it's
revenue
crazy
for
money.
them as well, and big exposure as well. And I don't think Saudi would take too kindly to being used as a pawn in a game really either as well. These are serious individuals. I mean, we've seen it with Qatar with the World Cup as well. We all
Mm,
went in thinking about all the negativity and all the other stuff that gone on in there. And yes, a lot of that stuff has to be addressed. But I mean,
yeah.
Qatar was a fabulous World Cup in the end. It was a brilliant stage. It was a great setting. It was a fantastic tournament and stuff like that. And it really shined things in a different light in terms of, maybe there's a little bit of back and forth that has to happen, where we have to have a little bit of understanding of other people's cultures, not necessarily that we agree with it, but that there's an understanding, and they have to come into the West as well, like they want to do, and have an
Yeah.
understanding of our cultures as well, and an acceptance of it as well. And somewhere in the middle, you try and meet, and you find common ground and stuff like that. But it's certainly the news that came out today and the tweets that were coming out today and everything else, it shook the foundation of the wrestling business, something that hasn't happened for a long, long time. And I just think the reaction is an interesting one, because we don't really know what's going to happen. We don't really know if these guys are buying up the company. We don't know if Vince is going to remain in the company. We don't know what influence they're going to have on it. We don't know any of this. You know what I mean? This is all just out
Mm.
there at the moment in the ether. We don't even know for sure if Saudi Arabia are buying it.
Yeah,
It's one
that
of those
was
things that went out there. But I think because it's a publicly traded company as well, they have to give the stock exchange notice, don't they, if they want to revert back private in a takeover or something like that.
yeah.
So I think the stock exchange either has to get 30 days or 60 days notice. So I don't expect an announcement anytime soon. There'll be a lot of hearsay,
No.
but I,
No.
I don't see them using Saudi Arabia as Vince using it as a pawn to position himself in a certain way, because he could do it anyway. He owns 80% of the company anyway. And now that he's back in there and he's being elected back onto the board and stuff like that and all, and it looks like the other stuff that had him moving away has somewhat sorted itself out,
Mm,
one way or another. We're not privy to because of NDAs and stuff like that. Um,
yeah.
but but from a roster point of view, it's like you have an interesting concept there, because obviously, the guts of, dare I say, 30 to 40% of the business is the women's division and stuff like that and all. And it's where that all lies if this was to happen. And then you've got obviously individuals in there, like Sami Zayn has been very vocal. He doesn't take part in the Crown Jewel shows,
Yeah.
because of security in relation to his life and his beliefs and stuff like that and all. He
Religion. Yeah.
wouldn't travel to those areas. So it'll be interesting to see what way that would go. Would he feel comfortable working under that regime? Would that regime feel comfortable with him working for them? And then obviously he would have a wave of support there. Obviously, he's so close with Kevin Owens and stuff like that as well. Would you get some solidarity in there as well? Then we have to say, what's going to happen to Triple H? You know what I mean? Where does
Yeah.
Triple H lie in this? That's the big conundrum. You know.
That's a big one because obviously his wife has left and he's still there, as far as we know. But
Yeah.
like that's putting him in a pretty precarious position, isn't it? Because we know how much that he wants to be the guy long time now to take the
Mm,
company to the next level.
yeah.
But where does he lie? Obviously he's still there. I think we would have heard otherwise, but it's definitely a sticky situation for him, isn't it?
It is, and it's a tough one for him as well because what's going to happen there? I mean, I suppose the thinking is, I mean, obviously Triple H has a very good relationship with the Saudis through the Crown Jewel shows as well. He's heavily involved in them. He's performed at them. And you can see always when you're over, when you see when they do the background stuff, the on the road stuff and stuff like that, he's always at the dinners with them and all that kind of stuff. So he's representing the
Yeah,
company
corporate
all the
stuff.
time. But I think for him, it's really for him, it's really important that the business develops in a certain way, and that old school thinking kind of goes away, and you can see that in him. But the interesting thing is, if it does go into a full sale and a takeover and go back being private again, does Vince even stay on? Do they retain Vince? Or do they look at it in a certain way and go, well, look, we looked what you were doing. We see how the company is rising here and growing again and doing different things. And by definition, I think all the metrics are up since Vince backed off and H took over. So that's something to be aware of as well. I think if Hunter was to go, it wouldn't shock me at all if himself and Steph decided to put together some sort of a startup business, some sort of a startup federation. I wouldn't be surprised at all because they're probably going to assume that there's going to be a wave of exits from the roster. So it would be
Yeah,
quite easy to pick up a fairly decent pool of talent into your roster pretty quickly, and not at a huge amount of money as well, where you're trying to poach people away, like what AEW tried to do, and they have to throw a lot of money at people to get them over
yeah,
the line. So I think there could be an opportunity maybe for that, depending on whether they want to do that or not. Obviously, they've got kids. He's had the health scare. And maybe they just want to do something different than just go off into the background. Maybe Steph's resignation letter that we read there, maybe it's bona fide and that she was taking time off. She wanted to
yeah.
revert back to that, and then it was a resignation. I think last time when she took a leave of absence, I don't think she resigned. The thing in her
No,
statement this time
no.
was that she had resigned, which sounded to me very
I'm out the
final.
door.
And I don't know how she feels. I'm not sure what the relationship is like there with the dad. I wonder is it a little bit toxic with some of the allegations that have come out and stuff like that. And I'm not sure. And then we don't know. I mean, you hear Vince, forever together and all this kind of thing and all, but the reality is he's had to sit in the background for about 6 months, and everything has been flung at him. The allegations, everything that had to be settled or whatever it is, all the problems that are in pro wrestling literally sat at his door. He was the
Yeah,
cause. He was the demon of all this, and he's had to sit back and be fairly quiet for 6 months and suck that up. And I wonder, is this his way of coming out and going, just giving the two fingers to everyone? The roster that spoke out about him, the fans that spoke out about him, and why should he care? You know what I mean? In reality, you would think he'd want to pass it off to one of the big US companies,
yeah,
to do the, how would you say, to do the right thing. Um, but it looks like if Saudi Arabia is the one, and if you look at the betting, Saudi Arabia were so far, they were second last in the betting. Only Tony
mm,
Khan and AEW was underneath them. So they were literally joint last, if you like. And then the betting was suspended. But if it's going to Saudi Arabia, I kind of get the feeling it's the old man as well, given the business and the fan base, the two fingers really as well, kind of maybe on the way out or something like that. I'm not too sure.
mm,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
But I suppose like an important thing to remember there is that's the amount you mentioned the World Cup, the amount of sports that's been there, boxing, wrestling, UFC, different things like that that's been in the Middle East. Question there: if Vinny does sell, do you think it's a good day for AEW? I won't support WWE if that does happen. That's obviously in relation to Saudi Arabia. I guess to be more people for AEW to poach, but they're still a million miles off, in my opinion, being the company that WWE are, which is no discredit to them.
yeah, it's a kind of a weird one for me because I kind of look at both as if they're nearly a different sport. So I always said, even in the past, when I want to be entertained, I was a big Ring of Honor fan in the past. I was a big TNA fan in the past and stuff like that. And I kind of always went there for my wrestling, if you like, wrestling. especially Ring of Honor. But when I wanted to be entertained and I wanted to follow storylines and all that kind of stuff, then I delved into WWE and I followed WWE. And I kind of sometimes think a little bit like that with AEW, although AEW has become quite gimmicky as well. But I often find that like there's always an alternative out there that gives you that wrestling kick. New Japan has been it for years. If you want to watch
Yeah.
wrestling, you watch New Japan and stuff like that and all. But in recent times, WWE has really upped their game. And I think they've also, if you look at it over the last, say, 6 months since the Old Man was in the background, wrestling has come more to the forefront. You know what I mean? So there's a lot more
Mm.
wrestling. And even in the structure of the matches, there's a lot more time afforded to the matches to make sure that the opponents in the matches and the people taking part have the time that they need to get their bit in. And it doesn't feel like it's forced and rushed and makes you look bad. And I think that's what a lot of people have
Mm.
enjoyed as well. I think the women's roster must be very, very concerned, depending on how. And I know we've heard talk from Shayna Baszler and stuff like that. And I know Ronda has had a lot to say about the company being in flux and what way is it going to land and stuff like that and all. And no one really knows. And it depends how influential Saudi Arabia want to be if they do, when and if they buy the company and stuff like that. Like, do they really want to be really hands on? I look at sort of the buyout of Newcastle United. They don't seem to be overly hands on. They've brought in Eddie Howe and he's been allowed to run the team. There doesn't seem to have been a lot of interference.
Yeah.
And it's still, if you look at Newcastle as well, they've still maintained the values of Newcastle and that Geordie fan base and all that kind of stuff. They haven't lost their identity because of the takeover. Obviously,
Mm.
their financial situation has greatly improved, so there's a lot of stability there in the club. But if you look at Newcastle will have gone from relegation right up into like challenging for trophies and and into top four potentially and all that kind of stuff. So for them, it's been a fantastic process. Um, so who knows what will happen in WWE? I know for some people, obviously with the issues that are out there, it doesn't sit well with them. And one of the guys, I think none of your business, I think it was in the chat, was saying he wouldn't support WWE. But it's
Mm.
not that easy, depending on how long you follow. Like I followed WWE since 1985, I think it was. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
And same with Jim Crockett Promotions and stuff like that. I can't spend I can't spend 40 years of my life following something and then just walk away from it. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not that
People.
easy,
People seem to think that if Saudi Arabia buy WWE, they're just going to pull the whole thing over to Saudi Arabia. Like, that's not going to
No,
happen. The bread
no,
and butter is America and Canada, and it'll still be
yeah,
there.
absolutely. Listen, billionaires,
Someone in here,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, someone in here with a very valuable comment. Remember, Stephanie was sort of flat, and then she came back weeks later with huge boobies. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know the validity of that. You know what I mean? And I don't think at this stage in her life and in her career, I don't think that's a very important thing. It was obviously a very important thing back then where she was, but where she is now, I mean, Steph's an unbelievable, successfully businesswoman and stuff like that. That's not a very
Yeah.
important thing at this stage, but a valid comment. But
It is to some people. It is to some people.
yeah, absolutely. But I just think, I suppose the other side of it, I mean, what I could see happening was, I know they're expanding NXT. They want to become NXT Europe and stuff like that, and not just UK based and stuff. Because obviously they've had some
Japan as well.
success with bringing in and Japan as well. But I'd say with Saudi Arabia, remember maybe they create an NXT out there for that region, and they have it as a
Yeah.
developmental territory, and they could run shows and have an extra show. They could run NXT takeovers and all that kind of stuff and bring over talent to do training and all that kind of stuff. And I think for some people it would be a great opportunity. Other people may not see it the way they want to see it. But I think in all these situations, I think sometimes it's a deep breath and a sit back and take stock of what's going on and what's going to happen and stuff like that. I think is really, really important. I don't think it's I don't think we should abandon our fanship or anything like that at this stage till we really know what's going on. I'm from West Virginia, WWF fan since '85 too, man. Nice. That's what I want to hear. So, like, realistically, are you just gonna walk? Because if you're walking away, if you think about it, these guys are multi-billionaires, multi-billionaires. This is literally a country buying this federation for all intents and purposes. So walking away, you're not going to hurt them financially because you can't hurt people financially at that level of wealth, no matter what you do. Saudi Arabia won't care if they ran Crown Jewel and there was no one in the crowd. It doesn't matter. They're just trying to create a situation. They're trying to be more bit of migration towards the West ways in some cases, you know what I mean, to dry and stuff like that and all. And I just don't think I don't think I can't walk away from WWE, WWF and all that. And it's good to hear. None of your business. Great to hear 85s. You're of my vintage as well. Would you truly be able to just walk away from something you've invested 40 years of your life or whatever it is? All the great times, all the good times, everything we've seen. We've gone through. Look, if you were ever going to walk away from WWE, you would have walked away from it during the ruthless aggression era, wouldn't you? In some respects, you know what I mean? I remember that period from '08 Morris to say 2011 or whatever it was, and it was heartbreaking. It was tough going,
Yeah,
and it was Edge and Orton every week. It was John Cena every week, and it was like really, really tough. So if you were ever going to walk away, then was the time to walk away. Eno's the same. He's a fan since '86. Shout out to Eno.
yeah,
Love Eno.
good guy.
But yeah, I can't walk away from WWE, regardless of the business. Whether I had to shop or I didn't have to shop, if I was a fan.
Yeah,
Everyone knows I'm a big Liverpool fan as well. I wouldn't walk away from Liverpool Football Club if Qatar or
yeah,
someone was to end up buying it off FSG. You can't abandon that level of commitment. And
yeah,
especially when it comes to pro wrestling, you know.
yeah. I think it's worth noting as well that when this story broke last night, it wasn't really from, say, a massive, credible journalist as well. And every time I'm looking at these things online, I'm looking for sources, and like sometimes you see on an article a source said, but there's no
Mm.
direct quote. When there's no direct quote or no direct statement from anyone involved, it's very hard to believe it. I just think it was because it was Saudi Arabia. If it had been, we'll say, Disney that were earmarked for it as well, there wouldn't be as much kind of public outrage, I suppose, there was over the last 24 hours.
Well, I suppose the outrage is caused because your expectation is flipped on its head because we're all sitting back here expecting it to be Comcast or someone like that, or someone who's had a little bit of involvement in the business somewhat through the years or whatever it is. And
Yeah,
when you don't get that and you get the furthest away from it, it's always going to generate intense debate and stuff like that, and everyone's going to fling stuff as to why it should or shouldn't happen and all that kind of stuff. Um, WWF and WWE was a brilliant company when it was a private company, and people forget that as well. Most of the stuff that we love through our wrestling fandom is during that time when it was a private company, not when it was a publicly quoted company. So
mm,
who knows, being a private company and stuff like that, if it reverts back that way, that might give it the opportunity to maybe do some of the things that it couldn't do as a public company. And I don't mean going back to the trashy kind of stuff it did during the Attitude Era and stuff, but I mean a little bit of loosening of some of the stuff, that they get oversensitive about at times. But yeah, it's a weird one, if you think about it. Like I was talking today, like Stone Cold Steve Austin, the beers and all that. You know what I mean? Like there's so much impact on so many levels and stuff like that and all. And then
funny enough, I was watching our own session with Martina. She done a show out in Dubai a few weeks ago with
mm,
Progress, and she came out with, do you know, the Asahi beer? But it was Asahi Zero for her,
yeah,
her gimmick, and she was drinking zero beer.
yeah,
Thought it was
yeah,
gas.
absolutely. Listen, you'll always find a way. The one thing about pro wrestling is it's so dynamic in the way it can move and shift very quickly with the times and stuff like that. You'll always figure out and find a way to get across your message, especially if you're a real good performer. And hats off to Session Watch, he's excellent.
Yeah.
But
Do you
yeah,
think
just
that?
yeah,
Do
go
you
ahead.
think that it being a private company again, though, just offers that bit more protection to Vince to kind of stay in the seat, so to speak?
Yeah, and I suppose from his point of view, I suppose he's clearly not ready to retire. And as I often
It
say,
never will be.
businessmen and billionaires don't really retire. They tend to drop on the job.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, when you think about it, the story that's written, I mean, they're talking about, I mean, word got out that he was coming back. They were potentially going to do a Hall of Fame at the next WrestleMania in Hollywood and stuff like that and all, and
Yeah.
all these things and stuff like that. And look, it wouldn't surprise me because we know he has balls the size of grapefruit. He just does not care at times. I mean, he'll put anything out there. I mean, look at the stuff that he was churning out prior to just going away on this hiatus. You know what I mean? It was
Just walking
crazy
out.
stuff. Just
Just
walking
walking
out,
out.
didn't give a toss, as brash as hell. And you know, wealth will do that to you. Wealth will definitely do that to you. But when we think about Vince McMahon and we think of all the wealth and the McMahon family and all that kind of stuff, if it is Saudi Arabia, that's a different level of wealth. That's even a
Yeah.
different level of wealth to Vince McMahon. Like, we're talking about a state coming in to buy the federation. You know what I mean? To buy the Fed, and I just think it's a different level. And I certainly don't think I could abandon it. You know what I mean? I just think I'll have to see it and play it out, see how it plays out and stuff like that. But my eyes is always towards the product. I love the backstage stuff. I love all the documentary stuff that they do. Maybe how the network will develop will be very interesting as well. Obviously, that's a big thing for them.
Yeah.
And look, it was only a matter of time. I don't know what way the TV deals are coming up for negotiation. I think is it 2024 or something like that. So
Yeah.
just
Pretty
over a
soon. Yeah.
year away and stuff like that as well. And we know what's happening at the moment in the market with broadcasting rights. They're going through the roof. So let's see what happens there. But yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting. You're talking about people who are coming in, that kind of like the business, but do they really understand it? But obviously they're wealthy and they're very successful at what they do. And this is just a new arm of what they want to get involved in. Football is huge for them at the moment. We've seen Ronaldo going over there. Look at the money that they're paying Ronaldo. Absolutely monstrous. So they're not short a few quid. So the one thing that comes out of this, if there's any positivity that fans want to take, it's financially they're going to be very stable. They're not going to be worrying about share price. They're not going to have to worry about any of that kind of stuff. And because they don't have to worry about any of that stuff, they can focus on, the business of sports entertainment, stroke pro wrestling, or whatever they want to put out there and whatever they want to call it. So yeah, interesting
It's going to
times.
be it's just going to be like, as I said to you before we come on today, that whatever we say now is going to be irrelevant probably in maybe in 2 hours time, because this story is just moving all the time.
Mm.
Just going to have a look at this. Promo Joe, did Vince together forever shit and having Trish walking around barking like a dog and Regal kissing his ass. But you see, the funny thing about that is that at the time we didn't really see anything wrong with that, because of
I
the era that we were in.
I don't want anyone coming on here telling me they didn't enjoy the Vince McMahon Kiss My Ass Club. Everyone popped for it and everyone enjoyed it. It doesn't sit well with people now, but don't deny what you did back then. We were fully engrossed in wrestling then, and some of those things when you look back on them now are absolutely crazy, and kind of with what we know now as well, even crazier. Um,
Yeah.
but don't take away, don't try and teleport moments in wrestling into 2023 and take the shine off it. You know what I mean? Because it's just everything is in a certain time frame. It's locked away in that time frame in the vault, and it's not comparable to the life that we live in now and stuff like that. And we shouldn't look at it that way.
Yeah, it kind of always happens really in any aspect of life. You'll see something historic pop up from someone, and there you go. There's a story out of
Happens
it.
all the time. Look at what happens. People go back and they look at people's tweets from 10 years ago and 12 years ago and stuff like that, and all, or their MySpaces or Bebos or whatever it was, and they think that that's the exact same person that they are today. People evolve and develop all the time. You know what I mean? And people say stupid things as they go through life. When you're younger, you post stupid things on social media that you shouldn't post. When you look back on it in hindsight and you get a bit more mature and stuff like that. But look, that's the way it is. You know what I mean? It's
There you go. I loved
well,
it.
there you go. There you go. There you go. Absolutely.
Oh my god.
It's
So
amazing
look,
the things that offend people so much these days are the things we kind of in the background miss a little bit, don't we? It's
yeah,
weird, isn't it?
yeah,
It's very,
yeah.
very weird. Very, very weird.
How do you think this is going to end up? Do you think? Can you see Saudi coming through with it? Is it going to be a case of who gives them the most money? Like, what way is it going to go?
I I suppose at this stage in his life, money is always a controversial thing with this man and stuff like that. And look, at the end of the day, he has to accept the fact that he's getting to an age now where, and it's tough to accept it. Obviously, we all find it tough to accept when we move on from things and we have
Yeah.
to adjust and all that kind of thing. I think he'll want. I think he'll want the right money. I mean, he fought tooth and nail for these crown jewels and that relationship with Saudi and all that kind of stuff at a time where he was getting a load of heat and backlash. Um, but we know the stories of him. We know the stories of them parachuting in, doing a show. We know the stories of rosters being held against their will and, money transferred onto jets and all sorts of stuff, all the stories that we heard. So, look, at the end of the day, it's always about the money. There's no doubt the love this man has for the business, but I just think if I was him and I was sitting in his position, I'd feel I've been got at the last 6 months, and it's been coming at me from every single angle. I don't think there's any angle in wrestling at the moment or any person in wrestling at the moment that hasn't had a pop off Vince in the last 6 months and held
Yeah.
him fully responsible for everything. You know what I mean? The
Yeah.
the real problem that you have at the moment is you've got a roster there at the moment, and some people have come back and have probably been made a promise on the basis of coming back that things had
Like Bray.
changed. Bray would be one. I'm sure Braun
Yeah.
Strowman is another. Um, Bronson Reed has just come back in and he was beating
Yeah.
Dexter Loomis and all this kind of stuff. Stuff that's been going on that wouldn't have happened when Vince was there. And to the detriment of the business to a point. But these guys were obviously made promises that, like, I'm sure Bray came back being told he would have a lot more creative control and, like, they wouldn't be going on with as much of the nonsense that they went on with in the past, the holographic stuff and all that kind of absolute nonsense that they didn't need. But
Mhm.
now he's sitting in a very uncomfortable seat where he's contracted into WWE. I don't know whether it's a year or 2 years or whatever contract he signed. And now he came back. The contract was lucrative. He got paid well. And my guess is it's a 2 or 3 year contract. He's caught in
Yeah, I'd
that
imagine so.
contract now. And now his fear, like a lot of other people, must be, is this going to revert back to type now? Am I just going to be dogged? Am I going to be the eaters of gimmicks? Am I going to be all this kind of thing? The same with the approach. If you look at a guy like Finn Balor, who we know well, is he
Yeah.
going to be boxed off now as being? Is he going to be like him and Styles? Are they going to be boxed off as the small guys, mid card, this kind of thing, not bona fide world champions and all this kind of thing? Is that going to kick back in again? And you know what I mean? All this kind of stuff. And it's just, it was moving into a very good place. And I was quite excited for where it was going. Now I'm a little bit concerned that it might revert back to type. But the only thing is, as I said, when you look at the metrics will tell you that Triple H had it going in the right direction. The revenues were up, the numbers were up, everything was up. Um, and maybe that might be the way that they want to continue. Yeah,
Yeah. Across
absolutely, and
MMA.
spot
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, cross
Yeah.
MMA, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean,
Do you know what
we could do a laundry list of people on the roster. You
yeah.
know what I mean? I mean, it affects every one of them. All the way right up to Roman. I mean, if you look at Roman in the last 6 months. Look at Sami Zayn in the last 6 months. Arguably, Sami Zayn's been doing his best work in the last 6 months, and he's been a
Mhm.
really, really um, consistent person in there. Go-to guy. Some of the matches he's had with Kevin Owens, some of the storylines, the jackass stuff, even at Mania. It's only
Oh,
a
it was
guy like Sami
brilliant.
Zayn that would have the dynamic to be able to pull that off. Most people couldn't, and it's just a concern. I mean, if they were to lose guys like Zayn, that pulls a bit of the heart out of the bloodline storyline. If they were to lose Kevin Owens, sometimes we forget that it's when these guys get injured and we don't have them, we realize the gap that they leave. You have Rollins now, who's after doing the knee, probably will be out maybe for a year. I don't know. It's the same knee. He
Yeah.
may get looked at. He might not even be able to come back. Who knows? We wish him luck in his recovery. And of course, AJ Styles, who broke his foot, I think, or his ankle on a house show
Yeah.
or something like that as well, from what I heard. And he's out as well. So there's quite a bit of talent there. You've got talent at the moment that's out injured. They're obviously going to be very concerned. What kind of WWE universe are they going to be coming back to in 6 or 12
Mm.
months? You've got talent there that came back on the promise of the good times are back, and the intensity and that bad backstage atmosphere isn't there anymore. Does that return? Who knows? In the 6 months that Vince has been away, has he had a chance to look insular at himself and see what way it could work a little bit better, or will he revert to type? My guess is revert to type. because I
I'd
don't
imagine.
think he actually, I don't think he's ever been overly critical of himself at any stage in his career. So yeah, I don't know. It's
He was never going to sit out a WrestleMania, was he?
he was never going to sit out, and I mean, it was very. I mean, you think about a lot of the stuff that's being said from the roster. And a lot of the stuff that they've come out with that, like, oh, it's great backstage now, and backstage is like Disneyland. Everyone's happy, they're all good, and all this kind of thing. But what they forget is by saying these kind of things, it's a direct hit at him, and now he's back. You know what I mean? And he'll
Yeah.
and he'll be back with a vengeance because he clearly doesn't care. Realistically, he doesn't really care about anyone on the roster. He will send anyone down the road. You know what I mean? Anyone in there who thinks that because of their position or their storyline or what they're carrying on their shoulder is a key to get through that door. You whip
Mm.
that off in a second to put you out the door and wouldn't give a damn. He'll
Do you
find
know what
someone
I'd
else.
love? Do you know what I'd love to see? I'd love to see his will.
I wonder has he got one?
He probably doesn't think he's going to die, I suppose. Anytime. He's only what, 77? Too early.
Yeah, 77, but I'm sure he's probably heavily he's probably been looking into all this kind of all this blood stuff that some of these Hollywood stars have been doing. It's a weird one, you know what I mean? I look at Tom Cruise and he hasn't aged since Top Gun. You look at him, he looks
Yeah.
the exact same, and you're going, what the hell's he doing? And that's a case for a lot of these stars. You look at The Rock, look at The Rock. The Rock's look better than he ever looked. You know what I mean? And I just think with Vince, I think, like, would it surprise you if we found out that there's a cryo thing there where they can, before you go, they can freeze you, bring you back, and all that kind of stuff? Wouldn't surprise me at all. Or get to the stage where they can do brain transplants or something like that. Big up Diego, good to see you there.
Yeah. Yeah. Good
Yeah,
guy, Diego.
yeah, absolutely. But yeah, no, it's one of those things. I don't know, it's a real weird one. Like, do we ever see a world without Vince McMahon? Do we ever see a world without Ric Flair? Do we ever see a world without Hulk Hogan? This
Yeah.
kind of way. These are kind of people that just transcended the business so much. You know, God help us the morning that we wake up and Hogan has passed, or Flair has passed, or Brett has
Jason
passed,
Kennedy would be having a party on the streets that day.
he would, yeah, absolutely. You know what I mean? And then, these guys, remember, these are the same guys who wanted Warrior and Yokozuna and Eddie Guerrero and all these guys, So in the initial stages, they didn't even realize these guys had passed them.
Mm.
I don't know. Maybe that's their thinking. Maybe their thinking is to revert back and, find talent and gimmick up guys to bring back those old kind of days. Could we see a second coming of an Ultimate Warrior or something like that? You know what I mean? And I suppose if it
In my
happened, as much respect as we have, who wouldn't pop for it?
yeah. In my opinion, the more gimmicks, the better. You know me, I'm into that kind of crazy backstage stuff, ambulances and whatever's
Yeah,
going on.
yeah,
But look, we'll wrap it up there today. Anyway, I have
yeah,
the description of your YouTube channel in this
yeah.
video,
Cool.
so if anyone just clicks onto the video itself, you'll see Niall's channel tagged. I do feature very briefly every game week round in the Premier League, but do you want to tell people what's going on the upper tier anyway?
Yeah, basically it's a football channel basically, and within that channel we have a Liverpool podcast, the Shankly Sessions as well, that I do on a weekly basis. But the upper tier is basically just a fun channel where I go on generally with Darren and Mark, our resident referee, and we just talk crap about football, and we just have a bit of fun, and we discuss what's going on in football and transfers and all that kind of stuff. We preview games and we review matches and give player ratings and all that kind of stuff. And tomorrow night we do it on a Monday. We do a Monday mashup, which is a review of the weekend and all the latest stuff. On a Thursday we do Thursday tier talk, which is kind of a preview of the weekend's action coming up. We also do we drop our bets and our picks if you want to have a flutter and stuff like that. Always gamble responsibly, and we talk about transfer news at the moment because the transfer window's open. So yeah, if anyone's in the chat there, if you could drop a like or subscribe or bell notification, all that good stuff, we'd appreciate your support. Even if you're not a football fan, you'll have a bit of fun with us on the channel. And Morris is going to be on tomorrow night. We're going to be doing a North London Derby preview with Kyle Walsh-Gunner, a man who never holds back, a man who has plenty to say, who's getting back into the rhythm of content creating now. he was struck down by the LC19 or whatever variant it is
Yeah.
now. But he's back in the saddle again, back with a bang, and he's going to have a good time. And yeah, and shout out, none of your business. Great to hear from you. And good to hear that you're of my kind of vintage, that you're an 80s wrestling fan and stuff like that. We're cut from a different cloth.
And as we say in Ireland, he's up for the crack as well.
That's it. Always up for the crack, yeah. But that's what's going on the channel. We also jump on anytime like Pele passed away, so we always do shows to mark any of the big ones if they pass away and stuff like that, and any other news that breaks and stuff like that. So if football is your thing, jump on, give us your support. If you ever want to come on, give us a shout, and we're always open to it. Absolutely, Eno's one of those guys, and of course Morris gives us great support. He absolutely lights up the chat every Monday and Thursday. We have a lot of fun in the comments as well. So even if you don't like football, you will definitely be entertained. There's no doubt about that. Cheers for having me on.
Well, yeah, pleasure today, man. Really enjoyed it, and look, we'll probably do one of these again. When we know what the fuck's going on, but like
we know next week when we find out next week Disney's buying it. We find out next week Disney's buying it. We'll be back on again with another one. Yeah, saying, "Oh God, now we're having to go to Magic Kingdom now to see Money in the Bank and all this kind of thing." Yeah, absolutely.
We'll log off now. Go online. There'll be some other story breaking, and this will all be old news. But look, thanks to people for tuning in anyway, having a look at the chat. Much appreciated because didn't really advertise tonight. We just kind of went with it. So appreciate everyone. Thanks a million, and cheers, Niall.
Cheers, bud.